I would have been happy to just pay for a restroom. I don't need the soda. This was an emergency. We had to go in. Leaving a great job, leaving a great job on a hope that this thing will work out.
Floyd Freeman spent 12 years as a general manager at Buc-ee's, managing 400 people. No engineering background, no hardware experience. Then one afternoon in Boulder, Colorado, he couldn't find a clean, accessible restroom to change his 6-month-old daughter's nappy, or diaper, if you will. That observation became FlushLocks, a smart lock system for commercial restrooms with unattended tap payment. A product with no direct equivalent in the US market, and technology that only became legally certifiable at the end of 2025. And here's what most people in hardware wouldn't have done. Floyd signed up to exhibit at CES before he even had a prototype, before he had a manufacturer, before the concept was fully designed. He used the world's biggest technology show as a deadline. The prototype arrived 3 days before. His team drove to Las Vegas in a van, programming it the whole way.
So we want to be in 5 cities by the end of the year. That's our goal. And then we want to be in 25 cities in 2 years.
And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Have there been any moments that nearly pulled you back, that kind of where you thought, possibly isn't the right thing?
I question the done enough is probably the biggest thing I do every day when I'm on my computer, and either I haven't had enough emails come through, or I don't have enough appointments in my calendar, or maybe I didn't go out and actually knock on doors, and I had 4 hours that I could have done that this morning.
Floyd built this product by learning just enough of each discipline to direct the people who knew more. Payment certification, lock hardware, embedded software. And he said something quite telling about what he's building.
I will be the last person to get money. So if I have, 20 grand, I'm going to make sure that 5 goes to you, 5 goes to you, 5 goes to you, and 5 goes to them.
This episode is about what it actually costs to build hardware from scratch. Not just the money, the trust you have to place in people you've never worked with before, and what happens when they come through. This is Why Design. Floyd Freeman, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Why Design. It is great to have you on the show finally. We met for the first time in January, didn't we? At CES.
First week of the year.
Yeah, and we're gonna dive into your story on today's podcast. And it's not a conventional story either for a hardware founder. You're not from hardware at all, really, up until recently. So. If we just very briefly introduce you to the audience, your background is retail, convenience stores, real estate, 12 years at Buc-ee's. We're going to dive into why you stayed so long, what the environment taught you, what made you finally leave. Well, then we'll talk about kind of how you got into or kind of came up with FlushLocks, which is why you're at CES, isn't it? And
that's right.
So yeah, we'll dive into all that. We'll talk about the CES breakfast as well, and kind of what you got from that. But let's start at the beginning. The background. You were general manager at Buc-ee's for nearly 12 years, managing 400 people. That's a serious, stable career.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, I had a great career. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. People ask me all the time, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? Leaving a great job. Leaving a great job on a hope that this thing will work out. So
yeah,
I grew up in that business. Yeah. Go ahead.
What is it that finally made you say, after all that time and you growing up in that business, I'm going to leave this to build a hardware company from scratch?
Well, I grew up in convenience stores. So when I was 3, our parents had multiple locations. But we started when I was 3, and they had up to about 5 or 6 locations. And so I was in that environment pretty much growing up for the last 40 years into this business. So becoming a GM for something of 400 people, that was, a natural progression to my career. But the FlushLocks technology, the creation of this happened organically with my wife and I. We really felt convicted that this was something that could be extremely incremental to not just, our life, but it could be changing the way we do restrooms in America. And so it was really one of those moments that we had to make. We asked ourselves, 25 times a week. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to do? Can we do this without, falling apart? Are we going to risk everything that we built, which is, I say comfort, great income, great family, friends, there was no issues with work. So it was one of those moments that we just had to make a decision. Is this really that valuable that we feel like we can justify the risk, right? And honestly, it was. It was, I would say CES was the validating moment for us when we got there and realized that people were really interested in what we had built. But it was not easy. In fact, there was always this moment: do we teeter-totter between both trying to be a GM and trying to get this off the ground? But everybody knows that doesn't typically work very well. People know that you have to be all in for something to really succeed, right? So it was a big moment. It really was. It was a huge moment for me to say, after 12 years, nothing's wrong, but I've got this great idea, and I really think it's something that I like to get behind. So yeah, it was very complicated. It was a hard decision.
Yeah.
Probably the hardest decision I've made in my entire life.
But no regrets, so I imagine from the
So far,
conversations
no.
we've
I mean,
had.
I got to tell you, a year from now, I'll let you know if everything's hit the fan. But right now, we feel. I mean, it's just got so much momentum, and we've solved so many problems that I didn't even know I needed to solve when I started this project. Right. So an idea is great, but then you get to the mechanics of everything, and that's really been the fun part of my journey. So, and by the way, I have no degree in anything I'm doing right now. I am completely a general manager. That's my mindset. That's who I am as a human being, right? So for me to go into this, this is definitely a moment that was not like, oh yeah, this is on my degree. This is what I should be doing.
Well, you know what? That's exactly what drew me to your story, Floyd, and it's very exciting for me as well. Being on the side, my career, kind of being a recruiter in the hardware space. I work with a lot of startups, but quite often I get, I get speaking to the hardware founders, the startup founders, a few stages on. Maybe they're just about to launch their first product, or they've, they've been through a load of kind of the stuff that you're going through now. So it's quite exciting, when you talk about, that's me in a year's time. I might take you up on that and see kind of what lessons you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
In year 1 and 2. Yeah. But that's great. So, Buc-ee's, according to my research, at least, obviously I'm the Brit here talking about kind of American kind of restaurant chains here, but Buc-ee's are genuinely famous for their restrooms. Apparently, there's social media communities dedicated to them. Was it that actually planted the seed for FlushLocks, or is that just too neat a story?
Yeah, it was just it actually, they do them well, but the challenge with what happened to us, we were actually in real life. We were in Boulder, Colorado, so we were actually off. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was very cold outside. We were walking through. We went to go get. We have a newborn. She's now 16 months, but at that time she was 6 months old. And we were going to go get her ears pierced. So we were in Boulder, Colorado, at the piercing shop, and she had a diaper emergency. And immediately, the first thing her and I did, my wife and I, was started to try to find a restroom to go change her. What we discovered in about 10 minutes time was there was absolutely no access. We had 0% ability to find a restroom that was either unlocked or that was clean enough to use. We found a public restroom in Boulder. It was completely unusable. There was trash. It was cold. It was dirty. I mean, just filthy. And so we stumbled across 2 or 3 good coffee shops or sandwich shops, and all of them had codes on the door that said customers only. And so as I'm walking to a final stop, and I just finally said, I'm going to buy something. Here's $5 for the soda. And I got the soda, got the code. We changed the diaper. We got in the car, and I literally said, I would have been happy to just pay for a restroom. I don't need the soda. This was an emergency. We had to go in. It wasn't, this was a moment where I didn't need to buy anything. I just needed to go to the restroom. So that was a moment where I realized we have an opportunity. We've been to Europe, we've been to Mexico, traveling, and realized that, it's not to charge for a restroom. We just don't do it here. And now that we have this interesting lockout situation happening across our cities, and I understand it as a business owner. I grew up in the family business. We understand it's a cost. So we know that a non-customer using your restroom is a true cost, right? So, but over this period of time, we created this mindset of, is it possible? That's when I started doing the homework and saying, I think this can be done. Technology exists in forms, not this
Mm.
specific one, but we knew that we had payment. We knew that we had locks that could be manufactured to unlock, right? So we knew that there was a lot of things that existed that could be combined to each other. And so that's really when we dug into it. Yeah, Buc-ee's was just I'd say just a coincidence, really. I mean, I think about the standards of restrooms I know very well from that experience, but yeah, this was a totally organic experience that happened extremely different from the environment that I was used to being in. But it goes back to 30 years ago when I was in convenience stores, when we really did have that influx of traffic that just kept coming in, and they sneak in the back. You see those guys, they sneak in. They hope you
Yeah.
don't see them. Hopefully, they catch you when you're with the customer, and you just sneak in and sneak out. So that's the environment
Yeah.
that took place. But yeah, it was very organic, and actually doing the research was the first exciting part, because you're online. You're like, does this exist? You're using AI, to search the world. Does this exist? No, it really doesn't. So the timing was pretty incredible for that moment.
Yeah, because there's obviously in Europe, in major cities in the UK and wherever you go as a tourist in
Mm-hmm.
Europe, there are kind of public restrooms, public toilets where quite often they're manned. Even though the payment mechanism is is card contactless, or it
Yep.
might be a coin slot
Yep.
mechanism, but they're quite often they're manned. They're um, these circular buildings. Quite often, you have
Mm-hmm.
the staff in the middle, and then the ladies go to the left and go the right, or the other way around. Um, and it strikes me that your solution, like you say, the tech already exists there. There are smart locks, that you can unlock with an app on your phone. So it's
Mm-hmm.
only, you're not very far really in terms of steps to add payment to that. But it's surprising that no one else has come up with it so far, or at least it's not widely known, is it? So
It's not. And what we
yeah,
discovered through that was, and it really, this was pre CES versus post CES. We discovered that it was possible, but what we didn't realize until really after CES was the payment technology that is possible didn't exist 24 months ago. So
really,
so basically what we did was timing was almost parallel with the technology existing for what is considered unattended, right? So a restroom isn't something that you have a cashier in hand, right? So it has to
uh,
be certified for an unattended tap payment. So those things didn't exist until really till the end of 2025. So the timing of this project and what was actually able, yes, the technology existed, but it wasn't necessarily certified. So we
got
really
you,
got into a great situation to where our timing of idea became timing of ability, because the payment systems were now being developed to say, hey, we don't know what we're going to use it for, but we're going to create this, mechanism that allows that to take place. So
yeah.
that's been a really
Bro,
big win. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we talk about timing a lot in my day to day, especially speaking to senior candidates, looking for work. Those roles don't come
Hmm.
up every day.
Sure.
Timing and being in the
Yeah.
right place at the right time comes up a lot. We'll talk about networking a little bit later, but it does tie into that significantly. But you're definitely riding the wave there. So how long after that restroom incident, changed the nappy slash diaper, when did that start to become real? When did the research kick off?
Yeah, so we started researching, I would say within the first week. I know
Yeah,
all of February and March, I spent trying to say, is this something that I can do? Not if it's possible, but something that I personally have the ability to do, right? So
yeah,
one of the first steps we did was this summer. It actually took about 3 months for me to say, okay, I want to do this.
yeah,
We met with a patent attorney, and, I just shared with him the idea, right? He can't tell me, yes, it's a good idea, it's a bad idea. He just can tell me if it's patentable. And so what we did when we met, he took this information that I'd put together on I call it the uh, the original slideshow, the original pitch, if you will, of my project, which was hilarious because after seeing professionals do this now 6 months later, my
yeah,
first pitch was hilarious. I think it was on a Word document, maybe a PowerPoint. And it was just extremely first grade, if that makes sense. But anyway, we put it together, and he understood it. It made sense, and he says, "You're onto something." So he goes through the cycle of patenting, and that's really become it. June was the moment where it really became. We studied it. We know what we can do. I think I can do this, and then that was the moment where it turned into a real project. That was the first actual check that was written. It was the first actual moment of action where we said, "Okay, we're gonna do this." So it took about 3 months really to kind of get in my head to say, okay, I think I can do this. What's my plan? What does it look like? Right, visionary. What does it look like 10 years from now? What does it look like 2 years from now? Right. So this was way before I signed up for CES. This is way before I made a decision that we were going to go on this big stage and present a project that we didn't have a concept for yet. So I didn't have a manufacturer. I didn't have a prototype builder. I had nothing at this point. So yeah, it was really about
Really?
from March to June, that 3 month period there. That was really the moments of at the drawing board with whiteboards and going through names and going through what those systems may look like, right? So
Yeah. So what you didn't have a prototype, you didn't have a product before you signed up to
I
exhibit at
didn't
CES.
know.
Crikey. Yeah. It's that's bold because it's not cheap to exhibit there either. Even if I think you're in Eureka Park, were you, as a
We
startup?
were, yeah. It was the
Yeah.
least expensive of the bunch, but still, you
Yeah.
want to show up. You want to make sure that you've
Yeah.
got some type of good product, even if it's a sketch. I wanted to make sure it was impactful, but we got really lucky. Met some guys along the way here
Yeah.
in Colorado that I said, "Hey, you've got 2.5 months. What can you do?" And they looked at me and they go, "We'll get it done." And believe it or not, what we brought to show, we got 3 days prior. We were driving to Vegas in a van, programming this log, I'm sorry, in the
Yeah.
van to get it to show worthy displays, right? So we got it on a Wednesday. We showed up on Sunday with the loaded version of our prototype. So pretty incredible timing. Like I said,
Yeah.
a lot of pressure. These guys really pulled it through. So
Yeah, all that stress and aggro, just for the Wi-Fi or the 5G to
yeah,
to not work in the halls as well.
yeah,
Did
it was pretty rough.
that? Let me interrupt for 30 seconds with something most hardware founders learn the hard way. The skills that get you from prototype to product are not the same skills that get you from product to scale. That transition is where leadership matters. At Kodu, we help physical product companies hire senior leaders who can formalize roadmaps, build world-class teams, and align product with commercial strategy. Director, VP, C-suite. If you are entering a new category, raising capital, or professionalizing your product function, this is not a hire to rush. So find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk before you make the call. Yeah, but that's an awesome story, though. There's nothing like a deadline and obviously the financial commitment as well to really focus. What kind of hours were you pulling, like in the lead up to that?
Man, I wasn't doing near the hours as everybody else was. I was doing the marketing and trying to make sure we
Yeah,
had, uniforms and business cards and something to put in the
yeah,
booth that made, that looked pretty. And it did. It looked really good for what
yeah,
we had for a brand new company with, money and just a lot of hopes that we were going to get it there. We really felt good that we showed up. And I mean, think about June to January, right?
mm,
So 6 months. And I had
yeah,
actually this is an interesting story that the failures that go along with the wins. We started off at the manufacturer that was recommended for us, and they said, "Hey, well, I've got a guy that can build your prototype." And we spent tens of thousands of dollars to get nothing. And so I made a decision. I think it was in September or October to pivot and say, you know what, I don't have time to play hopes that we're going to get this thing done. So I made a call to somebody that I was referred to during this process, and I said, "Hey, I need you to commit. I'm going to give you one chance. Commit that you can get it done." He goes, "I'll get it done." And so they really did. They pulled it off.
yeah,
But I had to make that pivot, and it was probably the best decision I made. 2 days late, I would have not been able to get that done. So
yeah.
yeah,
No, that's awesome.
those are hard
I remember.
decisions, by the way.
Yeah, I bet. Leaving something secure, walking away
Yep.
from that into the
Hmm.
unknown, sinking a load of cash
Sure.
into it.
Yep.
In a an area that you've you know you don't mind me saying, you're probably completely naive to. I remember you
I had to
saying,
trust every
yeah,
person in that process to do what they needed to do. So my
yeah,
hours spent was worrying, right? I was just sitting there
yeah,
going, "What's the update? What's the update?" Their hours was put into the actual project,
yeah,
right? So yeah,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, um, yeah, I remember you saying on our call the other week, that your team was talking to you about SDKs and Linux, and you generally didn't know what they meant 6 months ago. How do you make good decisions about things that you don't understand? You're worlds
uh,
away from what you were doing
absolutely.
before.
I got to tell you, I trusted the people that were on the decisions of what we needed. So the first thing I did was a crash course, and I would write down everything they'd say. I'd say, "Hey, we need a Raspberry Pi board. We need this. We need SDK hard, software written and all this stuff. We need all these accesses." And they would give me this description, and the first thing I would do is jump online and go, "Okay, what does that mean?" Right? And I would study what does SDK stand for, so I could put it
Yeah.
in my terms to say, okay, next time I'm on a call and somebody says I need an SDK, okay, well that means software development kit, right? Well, I didn't know that 6 months ago, but I had to learn those terms in order to talk to my engineers, talk to my my IT guys, right? So when I went to CES, I had this knowledge of something, right? So I could talk about, hey, we're using Linux and Raspberry Pi and Java, and it's on an SDK, and we're going to try, and I started to become the project, right? So my whole entire life was not about anything like that, so I really had to do a lot of crash course studying, and thank God for the internet. I mean, I was able to really go through and say, okay, what does this mean, and what's going to be the hurdle. Somebody asked me a few months ago, what do I use AI for? I use AI to learn, to go through this and say, what are the two technicals that I may be missing? And it's very nice to have a second view and share with me,
Mm,
this is why it's not going to work, or this is why it's going to work, or this is what you need to do to make it work. So there's
yeah.
a lot of things that I say I got lucky because, again, timing, serendipitous moments, and then having the ability to study
Hmm.
in minutes and get the information you need so I can talk to my team about this is what makes sense, and
Yeah.
understand what they're thinking in the process. So yeah, we had to learn payment systems, which is a whole different level. I mean, it's just an incredible. There's so many things that
Mm,
goes with payment. It's just so much. It's regulated, right? It's not just a piece of
yeah.
hardware. It's actually regulated stuff that you have to get to understand. Your project is this, right? It's an
Mm,
unattended or it's a semi-unattended. What's the difference? Well, you have to know that one of them is a person that's in the building. That semi-unattended or fully unattended is there's nobody there. It's operating by itself with 24 hours a day with
yeah.
nobody there, right? So there's levels of each one of these that have different certifications and regulations, right? So I
Hmm.
can't just make a lock and put it on a park and say, okay, it's free to go. That's against the law. I have to have certifications for that. So
Yeah.
all those things, when I created this in my mind, did not exist. So
Yeah.
those are the things you solve in a 6 month period along the way.
Yeah. It's the things you learn as well, isn't it? On the way, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, you might make the assumption, oh yeah, it's just chip and pin, or it's just,
Mm-hmm.
contactless. But then you add in the complexity of, the legislation and the litigation side of things as well, especially in the States. It's, you get something wrong, you get sued. And I'm just thinking, you get one bit of code wrong. I don't know if you've seen the movie Office Space from the 90s, but you had the decimal place in the wrong place, all of a sudden
Yeah,
you cream, you know,
changes everything.
it does, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, um, in terms of, I lost my train. Sorry, I'm going to mark that because I've
It's okay.
distracted myself with that Office Space.
See there, you're going backwards. You're replaying scenes in your head right now. That's
Yeah,
totally okay. I'll have to go watch it after this call so we can
it's one of
refresh.
the all time greats. What was my question? So yeah, I mean, in terms of the technology, you obviously you're the sales guy, you're the relationships person. You're learning all about you know uh, the hardware side of things, the legislation, the different territories as well, and all that side of things. But who's actually building the tech? I don't know whether you want to shout out some of the
I
consultancies
can. Yeah,
or yeah.
we've got I got to tell you, we have a good relationship. Avid Pro here in Colorado. They are building our prototypes. Are actually working on our first 25 real units here that
Yeah.
we're going to take into the testing world here, the pilot phase. And what they've put together, it takes a lot of time because things don't always just go together. You're putting pieces of things together and then you have to make, form around it. So a lot of times what we've discovered is, yeah, you've got this and you've got this, but they don't necessarily completely connect. You got to make things happen. So that's been the really fun part to see, and here's the thing. We went to them with an idea, they enhanced it, right? So we went to them with this is what it needs to be. And they said, well, what about this because of this? And all of a sudden it becomes even better. And then I've got another guy that comes in and says, well, what about this? Have you thought about this? And I'm like, man, that's fantastic. So between this group of minds saying this could be a problem, so let's fix it, we really created what I consider to be you've got a group of people with the mindset of each one has a different layer of understanding of what the complexities. So what we ended up with was, I think, something that I visioned as good, and now it took it to great. So we really went through the manufacturing on the prototype side with a lot of patience. It's taken probably twice as long as it could have, but we did it right. So now that we're in a relationship where we've got that built, they can't manufacture these, but they've got the basics of it put together, so we can say, okay, now let's take it to a manufacturer. And CES was rewarding. I actually had 3 to 5 still working day to day with at least 3, but I had probably 5 or 6 that really were good manufacturers. I was having to make choices, tough calls. It wasn't who was right because they were all right. It was who was the absolute perfect match for our company, and that means leadership. It means style. We talk about something I've learned over the years of being a general manager with many managers working for me. Just because 2 good managers are 2 good managers, they may not work well together. You have to find a relationship saying, okay, you're a CEO of this company and I need to work with the CEO of this company. So they have to kind of have a unity as well, because one of the things we had discovered through the process of trying to find the right manufacturer, it was really about who was going to work in my speed, style, who was going to be guiding me on the things I didn't know, but who was going to let me do what I did know, right? So I wanted to say, this is what I see, and I don't want you to disrupt that, but I also don't know what it's going to take to get it there, right? So there's a balance in there. So we really had, as far as manufacturing, we've narrowed it down now to where we've got a very clear vision now of who that's going to be. And so it's been a really good process. But Avid Pro out of Loveland, Colorado, they've been fantastic. Some of the best guys I've worked with in my career in anything I've done. So just great guys. They had a vision, a passion with me, and they were honest. Said that we're gonna make some choices here, and some of them aren't going to work, and some of them may cost $2 to $3 grand to figure out that it didn't work. So we're okay with that. But it's been a good run. Yeah, they're great guys.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's you're working with them, or they're working with you to get you to an outcome to deliver, and that's a journey, and it can take different paths, and especially with tariffs and stuff going on globally that affects material prices and just getting products in and out of the countries. There are going to be bumps in the road, so it's like you shouldn't try and iron over those. It's there's just it's build it in. It's part of the process. So, talk to me about a bit more about CES then. I'm guessing that was your first time attending CES. Was it on your radar before? Had you heard about the show?
I'm going to share with you. My wife came to me on, it was like a Monday or Tuesday, and she goes, "Have you ever heard of CES?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of CES." She goes, It's in January. Do you think we'll have a prototype in January?" And I was like, "I don't know, but we're going to CES." And this was in, I think, August or September. And I looked it up. I was like, okay, I can afford to do that. I'm sitting there going, okay, this would be the greatest show on earth. Because what I didn't know at that time that I needed was what I found at CES, which was manufacturing partnerships, cellular partnerships, payment partnerships, all these people that were in that room, not necessarily knowing what I was looking for, but what we got from it was a lot of traction on getting the product ready. So we signed up for CES. I'd never been. I knew it was a big show. I called my best friend. He's a tech guy. And I said, "Hey, how big is CES?" He goes, "The biggest show on earth." Like, "Why are you asking?" I said, "Because I'm going to sign up." And he goes, "You're out of your mind." I said, "I know." So I'm going to do it. So we signed up for it. And honestly, the anticipation for CES, I got nervous just not knowing what I was getting into because I'm on stage with the biggest tech companies in the world.
Yeah.
And they're there with, you know, 150, $200,000 displays and or more. And their guys are educated and engineers and, you know, doctorate's degrees. And I'm like, I'm walking in here as a general manager with the tech product, and I'm going to try to get this thing pitched. Right. So my entire month of preparation was just not falling on my face getting there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd never been. I really didn't even know 100% of what I was getting into. I didn't even, they said Eureka Park, and I'm like, that sounds good to me. You know, so I'm sitting there walking through Eureka Park, and
What's
I'm
that?
like, yeah, what's the difference? And I go to the big
Yeah.
shows. I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here, but
Yeah.
it was great. And then I questioned after they said, where are you going to Eureka Park? That's where startups go. Like, well, is anybody going to come? You know, is there going to be anybody there? It was just fascinating to not know what you're getting into. Yeah.
It's it's such an amazing show, isn't it? But
It is.
you know, my interest there is definitely Eureka Park and the startups, and then the side shows, the meetups. I always take a day to walk through the convention center and take in all of the big displays, but you know, they're not my customer. They're not the people I can help. It's Eureka Park where folks like yourselves are there that are hustling and, you know, wanting to meet people and get stuff done rather than just show off a product. So
Sure.
what were your expectations going into CES then?
We just wanted to see if the product was going to be understood. You know, I shared with the people that would come through, you know, we weren't there to sell anything. That really wasn't our audience. Our audience is more of we would rather be at a trade show where we're going to be at, you know, a restaurant trade show or a coffee shop trade show. Those are going to be more of what we needed. But at that time, what we realized we did was try to expose ourselves. We were looking for, you know, the ability to find partnerships and contacts for things that we didn't know. So as we got there, wasn't for sure how big it was going to be. I never will forget walking in on Sunday to set up. And there's carpet rolls everywhere and half written booths, and just, you know, I was like, there's no way this is going to be ready for tomorrow. There's no way. And our team's like, I agree. And then we walk in 12 hours later and it's done. You know, it's just, I don't know what happened overnight, but yeah, it was crazy. But walking in and then not knowing how many people were going to come in and looking up and going, oh my gosh. And just one after the next, we were talking to 5 to 6 people at a time, each of us. You know, we had this little bitty booth. It was, I think, a 10 by 10 or 8 by 10. And there's 5 of us in there. And I'm like, okay, we figured something out. There's not room for the actual people. But it was so beautiful. And to see the honest understanding of our product and thinking to ourselves, going, okay, they get it. Right. And that was a moment, because I was walking through and I was like walking through booths and I was like, I don't even understand what this does. I don't understand this. I'm not quite adapt to understand this. And then people will come into our booth and like, oh, this makes complete sense. I'm like, okay, thank God. Because, you know, I was worried, you know, if it didn't make sense, then how was I going to get it off the ground? So, but yeah, it was, I would say 95%. Good. There was a few people going, I'm not paying for a restroom. This is stupid, but it's a great idea. It's just stupid, you know? And I'm like, okay, I get it. Right. So
what was the, aside from those kind of throwaway comments there, you know, what was the toughest, critique that you've, from CS that you've taken to, not necessarily to heart, but you know, it's almost forced a rethink or some action?
Yeah. You know, I mean, you get asked a lot, what's stopping somebody from taking your idea, right? And that's a real question. You know, we talk about that all the time. The risk of going to CES with a new company is to walk in and have a door lock manufacturer walk into your booth and look at you and walk away and go, I can do that, and he's not going to stop me, right? So there's always a lot of risk when it goes into something that could be a great idea, right? So think about Europe. If you're in Europe, you're like, hey, I'll just go into Europe and I'll do the exact same thing he's doing, right? So we got to protect that. And that was one of the hardest things, is to broadcast, hey, we're globally PCT filed for patenting. We are, you know, and I'm willing to fight you on it. But, you know, at the end of the day, that was the response that we were getting was, you know, what's stopping somebody from doing this? And really there isn't anything. We just have to be first and foremost and know that we're, you know, 3 months or 6 months ahead, right? So that's what we have to do, is focus. Fast, you know, we got to go fast. But yeah, the criticals for us, we had a few, you know, I don't know if this will work in the US. That was probably the biggest feedback. It'll work, just not sure if it'll work in the US. And I don't disagree. I think that was the consensus. People are like, Americans are kind of stubborn to adapting things like this. You know, in Europe, it's been there for, you know, forever, right? Some of us were born and it was just already there, right? So to adapt in 2026 to paying for a restroom could be a challenge, right? So it's going to take somebody big. It's going to take a global chain that's probably going to be like, no, we're going to implement this in our restaurants to change the way we think about it, right? So,
Yeah.
and then the other
Yeah.
part is, how do you know what to charge, right? Is it $1 fair? Is it $2? Is it 50 cents? What is the real fair value for a restaurant? Because it doesn't exist in the U.S. So those are the criticals that, you know, as people are saying, well, how do you know what to charge? How do you know what's the right thing to charge? And that is the hardest question: is how do you know? What is is it $1? Is it 2? Could it be 5? I
Yeah.
don't know. You know, so we're going to play. That's the data that we have to get and say, okay, we probably know that $1 to $2 is probably fair, but we don't know that. We don't know what people are willing to pay yet. So
it comes down to their desperation, doesn't it? Their need. You could have surge pricing, you know, at some point, you know. But yeah, I think it's about normalizing it, isn't it? Like you say, if you get it into enough in front of enough people and normalize it, then the price is the price, you know. So that's awesome. What's been the hardest thing that's happened so far that you didn't expect?
I'll tell you what I'm going through right now, and I think I shared this with you, was the ability. So our side of the project is pretty much solved on the tech. We know that it works. We know that we've got it planned. We know that we have a clear vision of what that looks like, and even the next version of already having clarity on what that looks like. So we know the technology works. The challenge with our second part of the project, which is probably the most important, is the people who make decisions to install these on their doors are the hardest people to get a hold of, right? So you think about going into a restaurant row, or in a big city, you go into Main Street and you're just walking through a city that's, you know, they have restrooms, they're all locked out. It says customers only on the door. You go and you talk to the cashier, and then they kind of maybe get you to the assistant manager, and the assistant manager may know, you know, the owner, but really they talk to the manager on duty, and then the owner owns 25 restaurants and they don't really come around. And so it starts to become a little hard to find the connecting partner that you've got to really pitch to, right? I can give it to the GM of the store, and they may or may not be, you know, one-on-one with the owner, but the decision maker of the companies are the harder part of this project. You've got to get them, and once you talk to them, they're all great. I'm like, this is a great idea. But finding those guys and getting connected to those guys in this process is very difficult. So I would say that's the hardest part, is to figure out the right path. I think going to the shows like CES, now reversing it, going into the restaurant shows or the coffee shows where the owners are there, is going to be our next chapter, which is taking place in 2 months. So we'll be in some of our first shows here in a couple of months. So we're excited to see what that result.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think, you know, just from what you're saying, doing CS first, where you can speak to the technical experts, you can meet the manufacturers, you can meet the designers and engineers before you then take it to, you know, your essentially your customer base. You've got a lot of the, you know, the ugly stuff done already. So just finishing on CS, for now, or kind of wrapping it up. Obviously, you came to our breakfast. We hosted it with Mike from Brooke Stevens. One of my and I'm very biased because we were running it, but one of my favorite networking events, because it was, you know, in a classic American diner. It was, you know, pancakes and bacon and way too much coffee. But it was in a really relaxed kind of atmosphere, wasn't it? But you got to meet
It was good.
fellow hardware folks. So, you know, from that side of CS, did you expect that? You know, what were some of the kind of the biggest wins that have come out from the kind of the side conversations?
Yeah, so I mean, to this day, in fact, I was on the phone with Mike yesterday. So think about that relationship and that connection of somebody that you want to work with on a day-to-day basis. You know, we communicated. There was about 15 people. In fact, too many people to really get all in. But the people we were sitting next to, we shared that, and there was a lot of excitement about the project. And so there's 4 or 5 people from that group that we have continually spoken with. In fact, all of them valuable, just probably too many of the same, if that makes sense. I share
Yeah.
with this that the hardest part was making the decision on who was going to be the actual partnership of manufacturing. And, we had 3 great choices, 2 of them from that breakfast, actually.
Amazing.
And then you've got 2 or 3. Yeah, it was great. So you talk about, people like Mike, who still today we're bouncing things off of each other. We completely sync when it comes to ideas. He's actually local, had no idea. He lives 20 minutes down the road from me. So we have
Perfect.
the ability, we haven't copied 2 or 3 times. So it's been a really good organic relationship. But, that was probably the most valuable part of my trip to Vegas was the unknown. I had no idea what that breakfast was going to bring, but it did bring just a connection of people, all on the same mission. One needs business, one needs somebody to help them get this project right. So there's a great merge of kind of, you are what I need. You need customers. I'm your customer. I need manufacturing. You're the manufacturing, right? So, and it was a great group of talent, probably too talented. I don't even know how many people were in there that, just had the ability to take any project to the moon, but probably most of them. And so that was a great room.
Yeah, it was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. In fact, like I said, I got messages within the last 7 days from at least 2 people, probably 3 from that group. So it's been good.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad for that. It's such a wonderful thing, just bringing people together and just attending those networking events. For me, CES and trade shows like that, actually most of the magic happens, in the diners, in the punk rock museum, the informal around, and all the side shows. It's because that's where people kind of unwind, and you just get the real story, don't you, rather than the sales pitch. Can I ask you a question about when you were going to the breakfast, or you sat down, surrounded by people that have got decades of hardware experience, and you're the newbie. Was there any kind of anxiety or kind of nerves around that?
Yeah, there was, for me, the question because I knew who was going to be in the room, was, are they going to be like, this is incredible, or this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, right? Or is it possible? Which was the interesting part. Everybody kind of went, interesting. And of course, the same question. Nobody's thought of that? Well, they may have thought about it, but it didn't exist. So, the thought versus action, right? So, yeah, as soon as I started talking, people were like, oh, that's interesting. And then it was like, hey, let me give you my card. Give me a reach after the show. And organically, they were being genuine. They wanted me to reach out after the show. And then it became kind of, hey, you want to go have a beer? You want to, meet up for lunch before we all head out? And it started becoming really, they started processing it. They just stopped by the booth and go, man, I've just been thinking about it since breakfast. It's just a great project. I think you're onto something. And that was very validating. But yeah, nerves. I mean, talking to the guys who build this stuff, and I'm like, here's my idea. And they're all, everybody was like, oh, that's interesting. So, and it's amazing to see at that group how many people had been through so many incredible projects. There were people there that had built some incredible things, lots of experience and things that we all use, things right now that is in our life that we all use. I'm like, you're part of that project? I'm like, yeah, we did that in 2016. I was like, that's incredible. It was a very talented group of people.
Yeah, it really was. And every hardware meetup that I'm going to one on Thursday in London, and I'm not the hardware guy. I'm not an engineer or a designer. I just hang out with loads of really cool, talented people, and somehow make a living from being part of that community. But it's never been to a bad one. I've been to ones that have been better run than others, but there's always good people there, and it's as long as you turn up, you yourself, and you ask good questions, then the rest will follow. So amazing. Before we get back to the episode, a quick reality check. If you are building hardware, your next senior hire is probably the most expensive decision you will make this year. Get it wrong and you lose time, momentum, and sometimes investors. At Kodu, we work only with physical product teams. No spray and pray CVs, no bloated shortlists, just a tight group of proven designers and engineers who have shipped real products. Last quarter, we filled every role we took on. Average time to offer, 5.5 weeks. If you're planning a critical hire, do not leave it to chance. Find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk. Well, let's talk about um, where you're going then with FlushLocks. You've got manufacturing largely sorted. The payment
Mhm.
system is built. Pilots are
Yeah.
about to start. As this scales, especially if the UK and Europe come off, you're going to need people around you to do things like that. You can't, like go out and go to trade shows, go and speak to, find out who the restaurateurs are. How do how do you know where to start? How do you know who to hire or what to hire when you're not, you're still a relative newbie, a rookie in this field?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think the first thing we did was try to find the right people that believed in the project. I knew a few people, not in the tech world, but I did know some people in some of my people that had over the 3 to 4 years just being in Colorado. I'd met some people, and I was like, "Hey, I got this idea. I really want to get it put together. I need somebody, and I got somebody for you." And you'd meet this person, be like, maybe, and then you'd meet that person and go like, that's the guy, right? So our IT guys, both of them, just phenomenal. And they really were the first people that I hired just to say, hey, I need this to be done. We're working on a budget. I promise it'll be worth it to you in the end if it works. But and they get to the ground and they just started, pushing through it. They solved all the things that were going to be a problem up front, and then we talked through it, and then we said, okay, what's the solution? So we hired those guys, and then we started working on, okay, what does it look like whenever I've got a team of people that need to help me launch? So organically, a friend of mine that we'd spoken for 2 years about different things, and he and I were aligned in vision, if you will. And I said, hey, I've got an idea. What do you think? And he goes, please let me be a part of this. And then there was another guy, and of course he had a wife and daughter. His daughter was a lawyer. His wife, she works for a big worldwide company, and she works on presentations and making sure that everything's perfect, right? So I had
Mm-hmm.
this family that was just like, hey, we'll be a part of it. We'll make some money later on, but right now let me be a part of it. So that turned into a really good situation because we had a different view. I had technical views, I had law views, I had me and him just want to sell the heck out of it, right? So, and then I had another guy, and his him and his wife are both in sales, real estate, and they loved it. They're like, man, we can really get behind something like this. I was like, well, I need sales guys, right? So we started pushing through this group, and then all of a sudden, before you look at, you get 8 or 9 people staring at you, and they're all doing this for free, going, "Hey, we want to do this with you, and we know you'll take care of us." And that's the truth, right? It was just like, trust me, and this will turn all of you guys, successful. So all of these guys are still working kind of 50-50 between real jobs and this fast fantasy land of, in a few months, we're going to be on, a couple hundred locations. Right. So, once that happens, that traction will start becoming, real fruitful for my team. But
Mm.
hiring those people and then asking what you don't have. Right. So what do you need? I don't have advertisement. I don't have, I need to get to the business owners. So outbounding services, some of those guys we met in Vegas,
Mm.
hiring advertising, specialists, people that know how to get something off the ground as far as getting it viral, getting it, exposed. So yeah, we had to start going, but each person had somebody that they knew
Mm.
that said, hey, I've got somebody that I think can help us. And sure enough, it really turns into, it's about knowing people who know people, which is
Mm-hmm.
why you said those dinners are important. Because really that's how you
Absolutely.
find, and you gotta be truthful and say, I don't know this, but this is what I need to happen, right? So I'm going to pawn this off and say, I need you to help me get this, but I know this. So I want to drive
Yeah.
this, right? And finding who knows the best of what. And that's what I'm good at. I'm good at realizing, okay, I don't really know this.
Yeah.
I know what it's supposed to look like, but I don't know how to get it there, right? So,
That's yeah, it's a great skill, a great trait to have as well for a founder. One that many, they put off or they don't develop until it's become super stressful. It's like just give away as much as you can in terms of stuff that's
sure.
taking up your time. Give it to someone that enjoys doing it, that's better at you that doing it.
Yeah.
But to do that,
Well, the challenge with the
with
founder,
yeah,
the challenge is that you don't have the budget yet
yeah,
to
yeah,
pay the
absolutely,
people to do what you don't know.
yeah,
But the reality of it is you get nowhere if you don't get left in the project, right? You can
hmm,
you can say, oh well, I only have this much runway, but if you don't have left, the runway is irrelevant, right? So
yeah,
sometimes you just gotta say, I gotta pay somebody to do this because it's not gonna get done if I stay stubborn and say, well, I don't have the money,
yeah,
but I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So
hmm,
those are the hardest decisions. Say, I have to, you have to make a decision on absolute what I have to, and what is absolutely going to be critical to the project. So that was those moments where it's like, okay, I can do this, so I'll do most of this stuff myself, but assigning this duty and saying I'm going to have to pay some money, it's just part of it. So
Yeah, yeah, massively. Sometimes you just need to bite the bullet and pay for the thing, don't you? Are you, in terms of funding, is it bootstrapped? Have you got external
yeah,
investment, or
it's bootstrapped. We've got some good
yeah,
interest,
yeah,
and we've got I would say probably another couple of weeks worth of back and forth with some different.
yeah,
I would say at this point we're at a angel investor pre-seed because we don't really have any
hmm,
sales yet. We start next
yeah,
week or the week after with actual locks on doors. So
hmm,
we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks. But a lot of these guys are just kind of waiting to say, hey, is it going to work? Is it going?
yeah,
You going to be able to get this thing through? So yeah, as far as financing, everything so far has been
hmm,
me. We do have a great I would say a handful of people that are kind of like, okay, you're onto something. Let me
yeah,
see how much we can come up with. So we have funding in the works. We haven't really raised anything yet, but I would say by June we'll need to be in that moment because we're gonna have to
hmm,
manufacture enough to get the next chapter. So yeah, it's all been
yeah.
bootstrapped so far.
That's incredible, really, to think where you've come from in the last, 6 to 9 months. And it's a credit to your, the product, the idea, your storytelling as well. To get people on board and say, you know what, I'm going to give up, I'm going to invest my time in this, in return for some, I'm guessing equity or some kind of payoff down the line. But hardware's hard. Like 97% of hardware companies fail. So, and hardware people are, you know they know that's kind of baked into them. So
Sure.
to get 8 people on that journey with you, it's a credit to the product, but it's a credit to you as well, Floyd. So um, what do you think the team looks like in 3 years' time then? Because you mentioned you've been planning 5 years out. So
Yeah, I would say so. The good thing for our product is it's not complicated as far as having a bunch of employees in the back end. We have to have enough, but I would say for us, each city. So we want to be in 5 cities by the end of the year.
uh-huh,
That's our goal, and then we want to be in 25 cities in 2 years. So we take all the big major cities in the U.S., possibly outside of the U.S. as well. But I would say 1 to 2 people per city. So you're talking about 25 to 50 employees in the next 10 years. I'm sorry, in the next 2 years. And that's really we don't want to be a 500 employee company, but if we need to be there, we will. So we're hoping to really see that return. Um, we're gonna go as slow as possible, but as fast as possible at the same time. We want to make sure we
yeah,
hire correctly and don't pre-hire for something we don't need. We'll stretch farther than we
mm,
need to go and then hire quickly, but staying ahead of that is really you get
uh-huh,
too far behind and then you stop the business from growing. So it's a balance. I've done a lot. So this is what I'm good at. Hiring is something that I'm really good at. So doing that for the last really all my life, but let's call it for the last 15 years
uh-huh,
of really doing all the hiring and knowing when and when not to.
uh-huh,
Is a forecast that it takes a lot of talent. So I feel good that we will scale staffing just as we need to.
uh-huh.
I've got a circle of people that are all really, really ready to go. And I've got, 5 or 6 people a week calling me, hey, are you ready for me yet? Are you ready for me yet? So we've got a great
Great place to be.
place to be with people going,
Yeah.
hey, I want to work for you whenever you get this thing off the ground.
Uh-huh,
So our model looks pretty good for the next year to make sure that
uh-huh,
we've got plenty of people in the right places. So
yeah.
yeah.
And the US is great for that as well. Employment at will, being able to
Hmm. Yep.
say I'm gonna give my current employer 2 weeks notice, and I'll,
Sure.
I'll be I'll be
Hmm.
ready in a fortnight. It's fortunately in the UK, a lot of the technical talent that you need would be
Hmm.
3 months, maybe 6 months
Sure.
notice. So it's a little harder to plan and lean into that fluid network. So definitely lean into that.
Well, on the other side too is we get the opportunity to really say this is very flexible for what
Yeah.
we do. Our guys that are on the field, they can be, they can work if they wanted to 2 days a week if they went,
Uh,
all in. They could do, what they needed to sell and install, and then our
uh,
IT guys can work from home. So we've got a really good opportunity as well
yeah.
to say, for most of them, they can also work a little bit, say 15, 20 hours a week until we get to that point. So it's been
Yeah.
good.
Amazing.
Yep.
Um, You previously mentioned licensing the product for international
Hmm.
markets rather than building and owning
Yep.
everything yourself. What's the thinking behind that? Is it control, a capital thing, or a people thing?
I think for us, it's a realistic growth happens from partnerships. It cannot happen with me trying to do everything in one location by myself, right? So we know that eventually, the UK and go into Germany and go into whatever, just pick your country that makes sense. We know that for me to do that is going to be very challenging. So licensing, even inside of the U.S., if we were to go in, licensing into a particular chain of restaurants or licensing into a specific city that somebody said, "Hey, I want to own this," it makes sense, right? Long term, it makes sense. It takes that pressure off the team, but we can still grow. But it also takes the pressure off me trying to control. I like to
Yeah.
be in control, but I don't always have to be in control.
Hmm.
I just like to say if the vision is going in the right direction, then that's really what it's about. So for this, it could be because of its scale ability, because of the simple fact that it could go in any major city. Um, it really is bigger than what I think you can wrap your head around a plan. So
Yeah.
licensing is probably the way that makes most sense in your mind to say we're just going to let somebody drive that,
Hmm.
and we'll just take a percentage, right? So that's kind of how that organically took place. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, I'm just gonna kind of wrap up now with a couple of final questions, Floyd. But um, you've described the last 3 months as being genuinely exciting. I can feel that in the energy, and
Hmm.
it's building lots of momentum. But
Yep.
you've also mentioned working from home, wondering if you've done enough.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
we all founders always get that guilt. Have I done enough?
Yeah.
Especially when you start having people around you, you know.
Yeah.
So those quiet moments of doubt. So have there been any moments that nearly pulled you back? That kind of where you thought this possibly
Yeah.
isn't the right thing.
I question the done enough is probably the biggest thing I do every day when I'm on
Yeah.
my computer and either I haven't had enough emails come through or I don't have enough appointments in my calendar
Hmm.
or maybe I didn't go out and actually knock on doors, and I had 4 hours that I could have done that this morning. You question should you, and if you didn't, are you doing enough for the people that are waiting on you to get enough momentum so they can start making real good
Hmm.
money, right? So that's the biggest question. I don't put what I have at stake. I put what the people on my team have at stake, right? So I always look at I will be the last person to get money. So if I have 20 grand, I'm going to make sure that five goes to you, five goes to you, five goes to you, and five goes to them, and then maybe if there's anything left over, And so until we get to that moment, I got to make sure that these guys, because that's really where I'm at. So my time in the day or even in the week, like on a Saturday, if I'm off, and I'm at a park with my daughter, I'm like,
Yeah.
man, could I have done something today? Should I have done something today? Or it's Sunday and nobody's sending me emails, of course,
Mm.
because nobody's working, and I'm like, I need somebody to send. I just need something. I need an appointment for Monday. I need something locked in, right? So in not even really about what the appointment is, but staying active is the most important part of the game. Knowing that you've done something, the action that you took, and the result of the action, right? If it's a phone call, but it really wasn't valuable, but you stayed in the motion of
Yeah.
staying on the phone. I think that's the key
Hmm.
to thinking that you've done at least enough for the day to validate the time spent. Because as a founder, it is all on you. It really is. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a big believer in, you know, hold yourself accountable to the actions that you take,
mhm.
not
Yep,
necessarily the outcomes, because you can't control when things happen.
correct.
Not all the time anyway. And if you obsess over the results, that's where the stress comes in. But obsess over what actions you take that are going to lead to those, then you probably feel a lot better about yourself.
Hmm.
I've always found as well when I've felt like I've not been doing enough, and you have a little bit of a wobble about kind of the pipeline or kind of what projects are coming up. It's usually when I'm feeling in that kind of that imposter syndrome and that doubt where I'll get a phone call or an email like hours later with a project or
Hmm.
some good news or something like because of all the stuff that I've done in the previous months, the networking events I've been to, the stuff that's happening in the background that you don't know about because all you've got visibility on is your little kind of
Yeah.
little world.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, just stay active.
Yeah, and the other
So
side of it too is going to CES. You have
yeah,
at the 2 or 3 weeks post CES, you got 5 appointments a day. I was speaking from
yeah,
7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. Right now we
yeah,
get done. I had no voice, and so that was the momentum. So then you got to say, okay, so how do I get that momentum back? You got to go to another show and get more exposed, so you have another 3 weeks of conversations
yeah.
to have because those are very fruitful. But yeah, it's just I think once you get to a point where you got it kind of under control, then you're like,
Mhm.
okay, what's next? So it's good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Floyd, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about this. And I always enjoy our conversations. So I'm really looking forward to following your journey, seeing how the kind of the pilot programs go. But for anyone listening that wants to find out more about yourself and FlushLocks, where's the best place to discover that or to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'll share with everybody. It's paidrestrooms.com or flush-locks.com. Both of those lead to the same website. We have contact information on there. I will share with anybody that's listening that is interested in any type of relationship, whether it be partnership with restrooms or just curious of, discovery. Because I love to tell people, I like to help people where I can. And if somebody's going through a similar process and they're like, hey, I'm stuck, I actually have somebody I helped last week and partnered them with Mike, as a matter of fact, to say, hey, go talk to Mike. He's going to help you out. But Floyd at flushlocks.com. So FLOYD at FLUSH dash LOCKS.com is my email address. And I will absolutely reply to you guys. Like I said, I'll look for emails about 2 times an hour and just make sure that I haven't missed anything. So I try to reply as fast as possible.
Yeah, I can vouch for that as well. I think when
Yeah.
I started my outreach for CES, and I was like, I fly a long way to get to Vegas, so I want to make sure. I think you were the first to respond,
Yeah.
and the
Not
business
surprising. I'm
would
the
have been
early
very odd then.
bird.
So
Yeah, no, I'm there. I'm there.
yeah,
I tell people all the time I wake up at 2 a.m. and check my phone for some ungodly reason. So just in case something's
yeah.
going on.
You should perhaps as the business grows and and start recouping kind of some of your investment. Perhaps learn to rest a little bit as well. But it's
Yeah, it's
it's
good.
difficult when it's your baby, isn't it? So,
Yeah, it
um,
is. It's fun.
Floyd, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on Y Design. We'll drop all the links in the show notes, and so people can reach out to you. Floyd Freeman, FlushLocks. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Y Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Kodu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris White. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking why design.